Welcome to All Home Care Matters, the show where we discuss all things home care, with discussions on important age-related matters and topics. Brought to you by Enriched Life Home Care Services, the #1 rated home care provider in Michigan by Top Rated Local.
Hello, and welcome back to All Home Care Matters. If this is your first time visiting us here at the show, we want to say thank you for taking time out to be with us today. We appreciate how valuable everyone's time is, and that's why we try and make each episode here at All Home Care Matters something that will hopefully matter to you. Today, we are honored to welcome a remarkable person, Sarah Palya, the founder of Gus Gear. Welcome, Sarah.
Great to be here, Lance. Thanks for the invitation.
Absolutely. Sarah, let's start with telling us what Gus Gear is.
Sure. We're a company that makes products that help patients live their best quality of life with their medical devices that they might need for treatment. So that might be a central line or a feeding tube. We make products that secure and protects those devices, that keeps the patients out of the hospital unnecessarily and allows them to do whatever they want to do and not have to limit their activity.
And Gus Gear is named Gus Gear because of a personal reason for you, which is kind of what brought Gus Gear into existence. You want to share a little bit about your background?
Sure. Well, I'm actually probably the least likely entrepreneur you've ever met. I was a music teacher prior to starting the business, and it was my son who kind of led me down this path. I have two kids, Abby and Gus. And when Gus was born, when he started to get sick around the age of 2, that really, my life took a very sharp U-turn at that point. And I'm sure a lot of your listeners can relate to that. Didn't see myself as a caregiver to a medically complex kid. Just never thought that would be in my future, and certainly never thought I would start a business around it. But that's kind of what life does to you, right? And it was just his experience and his medical journey that kind of led me down this path. I struggled to find the products that I needed to help us live. So the doctors can give you this central line, they can give you this feeding tube, they can give you all these things and tell you you need them, and that's great. But nobody tells you how to live with them.
Right.
How are you supposed to live your life safely and not have to be in and out of the hospital all the time unnecessarily with these devices? And that's kind of why I created the business. None of these things existed that we needed to live our lives.
And you mentioned something that we hear far too often, and this isn't to diminish doctors or healthcare professionals, and I'll see if you agree with this, they can give you the medicine, they can give you the diagnosis, they can give you the test, but after that, you're kind of left to figure the rest out on your own.
Right. Yes, absolutely.
We hear that so often from families that we help to support and serve, where a loved one may get a diagnosis of dementia. Well, dementia is one of those wild cards where you've heard of one person with dementia, or you know of one person with dementia. That's all you really know, because that's a situation that affects people so entirely differently. And the doctors aren't giving them the resources or the know-how to handle that once they get home. It's kind of like your situation.
Absolutely. Yeah. My son has autism. He's nonverbal, as well as being an intestinal failure, like for the last decade plus.
Wow.
So, those things mean one thing to one person, one thing to another person. There is such a huge range. And you're absolutely right. Nobody really tells you how can you navigate that and integrate that into your life. It can't be your whole life. It's
Right.
just a part of your life. How do you integrate that into your life and still live a good quality life?
Right. So, Sarah, what led you from your role as being Gus's caregiver and his mom to now being a business owner? Where's that transition?
I initially created, it was the central line vest, I think, that really did it. When he got his central line, he was 7. Like I said, autism, nonverbal, no safety awareness. It was a really scary thing for me to know that we were going to have to live with this device long term, and that he could really do a lot of serious damage to himself unintentionally with this device. So I created a vest because I literally did not want to live the rest of my life in the hospital. I just wanted to keep him safe. I wanted to be able to sleep at night. I had selfishly no thoughts for anybody else. I was just thinking of us. And so when I created the vest, I iterated on it. I made it better to be more functional for our lives. And I was part of a community of other caregivers and parents. And I realized if it could do this for me, it could help lots of people. And it kind of changed my direction in that way. It was something I was just going to do for us. And I realized it could have a great impact on other people just like us.
Yeah, no, it's remarkable. What what would you say has been the most difficult part of the day-to-day life when your child has a medical device like a central line or say a feeding tube? Because I can't imagine, for adults it's difficult, but when you have a child, I can only imagine how much more difficult and the different situations that can arise when they're facing these devices.
Safety, number one,
Hmm.
safety. And that's as a parent, as a caregiver, that's what you worry about most, I think, is the safety aspect of it. When you're dealing with the central line, it's a life and death kind of issue with that device. If you have a complication with it, it can be very, very serious, and the outcome can be very poor. So that's always in the back of your mind.
Hmm.
And it's that safety, wanting to, I guess, mitigate as many of the risks as you possibly can so that you don't have to worry about them constantly. That's the hardest part for me.
What age was Gus when he had to get his first central line?
He was 7. Yeah,
Okay.
and I should say his current central line, and this may mean something to some of your audience, just turned 5 years old. So he's had one central line for 5 years, which is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, I was going to say it's not
They're
all
very
that common,
fragile.
right? Absolutely. And would you attribute that to Gus Gear?
Absolutely, 100%. He is, I would say, if not the hardest, one of the hardest customers on our vest. He is certainly the test case for why it works. He
Okay.
is extremely active and just really doesn't understand the implications of being rough with the line. So the vest has kept him safe for years.
Wow, that's remarkable. So tell us a little more about Gus Gear and what your mission is.
Sure. So we just want to help patients live their best lives, and we do that by providing products that they can integrate easily into their day to day, but they can also use at the hospital when they're inpatient. So hospitals use our devices as well as patients at home, and it's a really simple transition from inpatient to out. So we just provide those devices that help them live whatever way they want to live safely.
Wonderful. Do you want to go through some of the product line? Because I'm sure, viewers and listeners, they're aware because we've been talking about the central line vest, but Gus Gear is much more than just a central line vest company. Tell us about
Sure.
some of the products.
Yeah, we also make a G-tube wrap. It does a similar thing. So that's any kind of feeding tube, G, J, or GJ, a peg tube or a button, doesn't matter what kind. It secures that and prevents it from being pulled out. Can be really helpful for people who just don't understand. Sometimes, like for Gus when he was little, it's a foreign body, right? You just want to pull it out,
Right.
and that can be really problematic as a caregiver. So it just keeps it covered and secured. We make line covers. So if you've got, these are especially helpful with pets, oddly enough. It keeps the lines for infusions covered. Pets seem to have an odd liking to tubing for medical infusions, and so it just keeps them covered up. Also keeps them away from fingers. Gus used to like to pull his med port open, so it prevents that from happening. And we make ostomy pouch covers as well, just to keep that covered up and a little out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah.
Makes it a little more attractive.
Sure. Yeah, I know we've had several families who, their loved ones had ostomy bags and colostomy bags. And, you know, it's not so much them having the bag that bothered them, but it was, I don't want to go in public having this on display for the world to see. It's embarrassing, it's invasive. And, there wasn't, unless, in the summertime too, you're not going to be able to wear a big sweater and kind of tuck it in or, baggy pants. And, so you've kind of helped create almost, I don't know if this is a fair analogy, but almost a way to give them a fashion sense for their products, right?
Yeah, we have some people that like to just go very neutral with their covers and blend into their shirt or pants, but we have, I say, far more people who like to make a statement with their covers, which is
Sure.
fun. And some of this stuff, if you can't find a little levity in it, it makes it a lot harder. So it's a way that you can bring a little fun into it. The covers, ostomy pouches can be really sweaty in the summer against your skin. It prevents that. And we started with kids. So I always look at things from that perspective, though we have lots of adult customers as well. For kids especially, body image is everything, right? And being accepted by your peers. Imagine changing for gym in front of your friends with an ostomy pouch. So it gives you privacy, and it allows you just to feel a little bit better about, what you have to do in your day to day.
Right. Absolutely. Do you have any examples of a patient that has used some of your products that you want to share?
Oh yeah, this is the thing I think that keeps me going. We hear from patients weekly, and parents often use the words life changing when they're talking about our vest in particular. And that, to me, I can't think of a better way to spend my time than to help families like mine. But a kid who comes to mind is Bridger. He lives out west with he has two siblings and his mom and dad. When he came to us, he had 15 central line breaks in 3 months, which is
Wow.
outrageous. So he's certainly on the far end of the spectrum there. That's a huge cost. It's a huge cost to the healthcare system. It's a huge cost to his family. All the trips to the ER, all the missed school and missed work, and all those social events that you have to miss to do things like that, not to mention sepsis. So during one of those events, he was hospitalized for sepsis, which is very serious.
Right.
He came to us 2 years ago, started using our vest. So we went from 15 line breaks in 3 months to none in 2 years, which is incredible what we've been able to help that family do. And he's a super active kid. If you look on our website, the first picture you'll see is his. And it's him jumping on a trampoline while infusing his TPN, which
Wow.
isn't something you see every day. He can just do whatever he wants and he's safe. And that's what we want to give patients.
You're mentioning these stories and examples, and I just wonder, has a community formed also as a result of Gus Gear, where, are there annual gatherings or conferences, or is it, more social online? Because, you know, it, as a parent myself, I can't pretend to imagine what parents like yourself or Bridger's parents must go through when you have to sit and watch your child go through all these invasive procedures. I mean, we're not talking about going in to get your annual, flu vaccine. These are invasive procedures when you're talking about central lines or ostomies or colostomies, any sort of internal tubing or lines. And most people can't probably understand that, because unless you've gone through it, you can only, sympathize, but you can't necessarily empathize. Has there been any sort of community bonding or groups built out of these experiences of these families that you've helped with Gus Gear?
Not specific to Gus Gear, but I'm involved as a parent and as a caregiver in several. So my son is Shortcut. So there are a lot of good Facebook groups, and I'm involved in a very, very good Shortcut group on Facebook and another good TPN group. It's just centered around caregivers and patients who use TPN, which is total parenteral nutrition, um, to get their source of nutrition. And so
Right.
that's Gus in both cases. So being involved in those groups has been tremendously helpful for me as a caregiver. That's where I've gotten my most valuable advice from other caregivers. That part is so important. And there are lots of families in both those groups who use our products and talk about them a lot to other parents and recommend them for sure.
Remarkable. What what would you say is a way that Gus Gear's products fit into the inpatient and home environments? Because that's a little bit different than being in a medical facility where everything's readily right there and available. How does Gus Gear fit into the home environment?
So for home patients, they can access our devices in a number of ways through our website. They can pay out of pocket through the website. If they have a waiver that they're qualified for, a lot of times waiver funds will pay for our devices, so they can talk to their case manager about that. And then if they're inpatient, they can talk to their medical team about providing them for them. We work with about 70 hospitals here in the US, in Canada, and in the UK who provide specifically the vest and the G-tube wrap for their patients, because they see the value in keeping them out of the hospital and returning and having unnecessary procedures. So they can access the products that way, but they really flow very nicely inpatient, outpatient. So they're washable and reusable, but they're single patient use. So they go with the patient, and you can take them in the hospital. They can go through radiology. So if you have a child who has to go in for a procedure, maybe you're looking at access and they're having an ultrasound, they can keep that device on and they don't have to take it off and risk a line break while they're having a procedure. So we've made sure that we've addressed some of those things in the manufacturing too. So to make it simpler for patients to use them in and outpatient.
How long has Gus Gear been around, Sarah?
A little over a decade. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And so Gus is how old now?
Just turned 18.
Oh, congratulations. All right.
Now we're
Remarkable.
navigating all of the adult services, which has been challenging as well.
Yeah, I can only imagine. What what are your plans? What's next for Gus Gear?
So we just published our first study. So we have our first data that shows that the vest has improved outcomes and lowered rates of sepsis for patients. So we just published that in the spring. That was through the Children's Hospital Pittsburgh. And then with the same group, they have wrapped up their data collection for a randomized controlled trial. And that should publish either this winter or in the spring. So we're really excited about that data. It helps patients go to their clinicians and say, you need to get these devices for us, and here's the data you can use to do that. And it just helps smooth that process and takes the onus off the patients to provide these things for themselves and puts the onus where it should be on the medical community to provide the safety that the patients need.
Well, and I'm just sitting here wondering, you mentioned, 70 hospitals, the UK, Canada. There's a whole lot more than 70 hospitals out there.
For sure.
And maybe you can't answer this and maybe you'd like to be able to down the road, but why would Gus Gear not be available to all of these families in all of these other states, hospitals, communities, and countries? I mean, I know central lines, I know ostomies and all of this stuff, and maybe some of the listeners and viewers may not be as familiar with it, but for those who are, they're probably wondering the same thing. Why would this not be more readily accessible and available in other hospitals? What would be the reasoning for it?
So data is one big reason. So we are getting over that hurdle, like I said, with our publications. So that's the first part of it. The second is it kind of sits in a category, our vest in particular, it sits in a category of its own. So there doesn't really exist a category in the infusion nursing standards of practice. So what we're looking at right now is when they revise their standards, maybe they'll create a category where our device can sit, because they do recommend not just your dressing, but a secondary securement device. Ours kind of just is, it's its own animal and it needs its own category. So that's the second reason, data, and then it needs to be written into the standards and have a category of its own. And we just need awareness. So honestly, that's the patients. Our customers have been fantastic. They're our biggest advocates. They go to their providers and they say, we need this. Do you know about this product? And that's how we've gotten into many of the hospitals we're in. Our customers are absolutely fantastic. They're great advocates.
Well, so that's what I was wondering. I mean, does it start with, first it starts with Gus and then talking to other families or maybe, Gus's doctor, and then it kind of spreads and matriculates from there. But is it going through, like, what does that process look like where it gets recognized as one of the standards? Like, is that the AMA, the American Medical Association, or the American Heart Association?
So
Like,
we've
how do
been
you,
working hospital to hospital.
okay.
Honestly, it is we work with several who use it as standard of care,
Mhm.
but it's a process to get there, right? Everybody
Absolutely.
has their own process to bring a product in and all of those things, and they have different standards. I don't know if there's one organization.
Okay.
Infusion Nursing Society would probably be the one, if that would be the case. But I think it comes down to hospital what they want as their standard of care for their patients. And so it really is an individual effort and it takes a long time. And it's the patients being the advocates has been incredibly helpful to us.
Well, I'm going back to, your example or success story of Bridger. I mean, I think that's the proof in the pudding, so to speak. You have this young boy who had, was it 7 different central lines within a month or two?
15 breaks in 3 months.
15 breaks in 3 months. He gets the Gus Gear vest, and then he's had the same line for 2 years. I mean, if that's not evident enough, I mean, I'm not sure anything is. That, I mean, I'm just really, really proud to know you and to know about Gus Gear because, our goal is to help raise awareness for families and caregivers and people dealing with long-term care issues. And, when I learned of Gus Gear, I said, this is remarkable. I mean, this is truly an example of saying it's life-changing, and it really is because as a parent yourself going through this, with Gus, being able to give not only the parents the peace of mind, but also preventing your child from having to go through all of these invasive procedures by simply, and I don't want to, understate how important and significant the vest is, but something as simple as wearing a vest like Gus Gear, you can avoid all of that. I mean, like you said, I mean, the cost to the family and to the child or whoever it is wearing the vest, it's significant when you have to go in for all those procedures. The risk, like you said, for sepsis, infection, but then also the psychological toll as a young child, always having to be drugged back in for these invasive procedures, leaving thinking, okay, how long until I have to go back and get another one because this one's going to break in a few days or whatever. And just by having this vest, Sarah, it's remarkable. I mean, it's tremendous, and we'll be proud to share this with all of our viewers and listeners, and help promote Gus Gear however we're able to. Because I mean, this is truly, I can tell it's a heart calling for you. This isn't, it's not just a business. And that's what we like to say about All Home Care Matters. It's truly about helping to make a difference, and Gus Gear is right at the forefront of making differences, and we really appreciate you being here with us today.
Appreciate that. That was very kind. We look at it sort of holistically. It's certainly about the patient, but it's about the caregiver. It's about the whole family.
Right.
All the things that my daughter has gone through related to all the hospitalizations. She didn't ever have to have one, but it affects the whole family. And anything you can do to lessen that burden on the family, you want to be able to do. And like you said, it's such a simple thing. It's just changing the perception. If in healthcare can be, it's a long project for sure. But changing that viewpoint and getting them to accept a new standard, just to help their patients, it does help with outcomes.
Absolutely.
Less hospitalizations improves your outcomes for sure.
So the last question I want to ask you, and I'll put you on the spot. If I could ask you to say what your final goal is at the end of the day for Gus Gear, what is it?
Oh, that's a hard question. Standard of care for our devices for families, because it's my strong belief that families should not pay for these ever. So we offer discounts for our families. So if families do have to purchase them, there are 2 discounts on the website they can apply for. They're very simple. But I don't think families should ever have to pay for them. So we're working very hard to gather the data to convince the medical establishment that these things are worthwhile and they should be provided for patients. Standard of care, they should not have to pay out of pocket for them. So that's the goal for me, is that no patient ever has to pay for them.
Does that mean that it's recognized by private health insurance, Medicare, Medicaid? Okay. Yeah.
Yes, and we are working on all of that. It's a very long process. We've been working on it for a number of years, and we're making good progress. We just have to keep plugging away. Patients have to keep asking for it. We have to keep gathering our data and keep pushing forward. We'll get there eventually, but that is the goal for me.
Well, and we're proud to help Gus Gear and you and Gus however we can. We will have all the links to Gus Gear and all of your platforms in the show notes. I believe we have a video that is going to start here at the conclusion of our interview. And then we encourage people to, share the story of Gus Gear and, share the product, because most people will know somebody at some point that is going to need either a central line or an ostomy bag. I mean, it's just unfortunate that is a typical thing that does happen. And this will help to keep them safe and to make their life easier if and when that time comes that they require one of these procedures. So, Sarah, thank you so much for joining us. I hope to have you back in the future so we can talk about the latest successes of Gus Gear and give our best to Gus. Hopefully, one day we'll get to meet him too. Remarkable story. And I just think you're a remarkable person, and Gus Gear is going to just really change lives like it has been doing.
All right. Thank you, Lance.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you for joining us today here at All Home Care Matters. All Home Care Matters is here to help families as they navigate these long-term care issues. We invite you to visit us at allhomecarematters.com, where there's a private, secure, fillable form where you can give us feedback, show ideas, or if you have questions. Every form is read and responded to. And remember, you can listen to the show on any of your favorite podcast streaming platforms or watch the show on our official YouTube channel. Just make sure to hit that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode. We'd also like to say thank you to Sarah Palya, the founder of Gus Gear, for joining us today here at All Home Care Matters. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again next time.
Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to you joining us again on another episode of All Home Care Matters. To learn more about the show and to connect with us, visit us at allhomecarematters.com.